China accuses U.S. of destabilizing Korean peninsula. Earlier this week, Washington and Seoul agreed on the deployment of nuclear-armed U.S. submarines to the region to deter North Korea. U.S. plans to send submarines to South Korea armed with nuclear weapons will likely aggravate tensions in the region, China's foreign ministry has said. Earlier this week, U.S. President Joe Biden announced the deployment with his South Korean colleague, Yoon Suk-yeol. Speaking to the press on Thursday, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning argued that the U.S., in order to realize its own geopolitical interests and disregarding regional security, insisted on making use of the peninsula issue to create tension. She went on to accuse Washington of being stuck in a Cold War mentality as well as undermining the nuclear non-proliferation system and efforts to denuclearize the Korean peninsula. On Wednesday, President Biden received his South Korean counterpart at the White House where the two leaders unveiled the Washington Declaration. Speaking to reporters, the U.S. head of state proclaimed that extended deterrence against North Korea's nuclear and missile threats could have a nuclear dimension as well. We will have visits to port, visits of nuclear submarines and things like that, Biden stated. The U.S. president also said that to ensure even closer cooperation, closer consultation, the two nations have also agreed to establish a body called the Nuclear Consultative Group. Peace can be achieved on the Korean peninsula, Biden argued, through the superiority of overwhelming forces. Pyongyang has test-fired more than 100 missiles since the beginning of 2022, and this month alone tested its first solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile and a nuclear-capable underwater attack drone. Washington and Seoul perceive the DPRK's increased military activities as a security threat, and have stepped up their joint drills on the peninsula in response. North Korea, in turn, claims that its missile program is defensive in nature, accusing the South and U.S. of plotting an attack. The country has also vehemently protested against joint defense maneuvers by Washington and Seoul, describing them as provocations. Chinese naval vessels evacuating nationals from conflict-hit Sudan. Two Chinese People's Liberation Army naval vessels evacuated 678 people from conflict-hit Sudan and arrived at Jeddah Islamic Port in Saudi Arabia on Thursday afternoon. They are now on their way to evacuate the second batch of people from Sudan. Among the first batch of the evacuees, 668 are Chinese nationals and 10 are foreigners. This is the third overseas evacuation mission of the Chinese Navy, following the evacuation operations in Libya in 2011 and Yemen in 2015. The two naval vessels are the 43rd Chinese Naval Escort Task Forces in the Gulf of Aden and waters off Somalia, guided missile destroyer Nanning and comprehensive supply ship Wei Shenhu. The two ships immediately set sail to Port Sudan after receiving the evacuation mission and arrived at the port on Wednesday. The force consists of one shipborne helicopter and more than 490 troops, among which dozens are special operations soldiers. Upon their arrival at Port Sudan, soldiers of the two vessels soon cleared a security warning area at the dock and set up areas for assembly, registration, security check, and boarding. The Special Operation Forces arm guarded the site in full gear. A bus fleet carrying the first batch of evacuees arrived at the dock at about 4:40 p.m. local time. Some of them cheered in excitement, "Long live the motherland." Additionally, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said on Thursday afternoon that over 1,300 Chinese nationals have been evacuated from Sudan, including some who are on their way out of the country. A small number of Chinese nationals remain outside the Sudanese capital and the Chinese government will continue to provide help to them, Mao added. Deadly armed clashes between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces in Khartoum and other areas have taken place since April 15. At least 512 people have been killed and over 4,000 others injured in the clashes, according to Sudan's health ministry on Wednesday. Tehran believes still possible to resolve latest issues on nuclear deal, Envoy to Vienna. The current status of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPO, also known as the Iranian nuclear deal, is the result of U.S. policies and miscalculations, but there is a chance to resolve latest issues. permanent representative of Iran to international organizations in Vienna Mohsen Naziri ASL said. The current status of the JCPOA is the product of U.S. policies and miscalculations. Our past experience has taught us to become engaged in the new round of negotiations with more care and sensitivity. The few remaining issues from the last round of negotiations could be addressed, Naziri ASL said. The final steps in the negotiations to resume the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, can be taken without preconditions. The U.S. needs to have the will and strength to complete these talks, Mohsen Naziri ASL said. Without any preconditions and through the goodwill and determination of all parties, and within the framework of the negotiations held until now, the final steps of the talks can be taken. The U.S. needs to have the will and strength to conclude the lengthy talks. Iran continuously expressed its readiness to continue negotiations until the conclusion of the agreement, the diplomat said. Talks to resume the JCPOA with Iran began in December 2021. Their main goal is to restore the deal and lift the sanctions previously imposed on Tehran by the United States after Washington's withdrawal from the JCPOA in 2018. However, progress on the deal was frozen by September 2022 amid a series of mass protests in Iran, for which Tehran blamed the U.S. and other Western countries. Iran gives priority to dialogue and resolution of crises, Ukraine conflict. Iran condemns warmongering and the imposition of unilateral sanctions, and gives priority to dialogue and diplomacy in narrowing differences between parties to a conflict, including to that in Ukraine, Mohsen Naziri ASL said. The principal position of the Islamic Republic of Iran as a victim of imposed war, threat, and unilateral sanctions by the United States and the West, is respect for the Charter of the United Nations and international law, including non-use of force or threat to force, territorial integrity and sovereign equality. Iran denounces war and unilateral sanctions, and its absolute preference is for dialogue and diplomacy in dispute settlement between states, Naziri ASL said. Tehran also condemns the Cold War-era hegemonic mentality and unilateralism by the United States and other Western nations through national policies and regional arrangements such as NATO, the Iranian diplomat said, adding that that was one of the main root causes of many crises in the world, including the ongoing one in Ukraine. After more than 1 year of military conflict in Ukraine, which has caused human and material losses to the parties to the conflict and has had harmful consequences for the world, the international community needs to reinforce its efforts on an immediate peaceful settlement of this crisis through diplomacy, Naziri ASL told Sputnik. He noted that it was high time for genuine diplomacy activation to put an end to the Ukraine conflict and unilateral sanctions and stop advertising and fueling the war. Naziri ASL added that Iran had announced its readiness to contribute to the peaceful settlement of the crisis and also supported China's peace plan for Ukraine released on February 24. Russia launched its special military operation in Ukraine in February 2022. The West responded by imposing comprehensive sanctions against Moscow, while also ramping up its military support for Kiev. The European Union, in particular, has imposed 10 packages of sanctions against Russia since the onset of the Ukraine crisis. Asian News Arap, Philippines goes through gruesome hot spell, and more. Here are a few stories from around Asia you may have missed this week. The Philippines is going through a hot spell, with the country's Department of Education saying school authorities can call off in-person classes to safeguard the health of students and staff. The Philstar paper reported, the country is bracing for the return of El Niño, the weather phenomenon that could bring dry spells and droughts, and cause a wide range of health problems. Social Welfare Secretary Rex Gatchalian said they are ready to assist farmers and farm workers who are affected by El Niño. China has announced that as of April 29, all inbound travelers only need a negative antigen test result within 48 hours of flying rather than the previous mandatory PCR tests before boarding flights, said Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning at a daily press conference on Tuesday. Immediately after the announcement, Chinese embassies in other countries issued updates to the latest epidemic prevention and control guidelines for travelers to China. The Indian Space Research Organisation on April 22 launched a polar satellite launch vehicle C-55, PSLV C-55, mission carrying 2 Singapore satellites weighing 757 kilograms. The primary payload is an Earth observation satellite. The 2 satellites are intended to be launched into an eastward low-inclination orbit. Japan's startup iSpace admitted on Wednesday that its plan to become the first private company to land on the moon had failed. However, it has pledged to move ahead with new missions. The unmanned Hakuto-R Mission 1 lander had been scheduled to arrive on the moon's surface on Wednesday, but communications were lost during its descent and had still not been re-established 25 minutes after the scheduled landing. It has been determined that there is a high probability that the lander eventually made a hard landing on the moon's surface, iSpace said in a statement. The company said its engineers were working to establish why the landing had failed. Blasts in a police ammunition depot in northwestern Pakistan has killed 17, police said. The dead include 9 policemen, 5 detainees, and 3 civilians, Swat Valley Police Chief Shafiullah Gandapur said on Tuesday. More than 50 people were injured and several buildings in the vicinity collapsed. The Dawn newspaper reported that the explosion that rocked the police station, which reportedly occurred on the premises of the Counter-Terrorism Department office, came hours after a raid by the department in Laki Merwat resulted in the killing of 3 suspected militants. BBC boss steps down over incriminating report. An inquiry revealed Richard Sharp's failure to disclose that he provided financial advice to ex-PM Boris Johnson prior to his appointment. The chairman of UK state broadcaster BBC, Richard Sharp, has announced his resignation after a report found him in breach of the Governance Code for Public Appointments. The probe uncovered that he had withheld information over his involvement with former Prime Minister Boris Johnson's finances, before getting the top job at the media network. The claim first appeared in the Sunday Times back in January. The Commissioner of Public Appointments subsequently tasked barrister Adam Heppenstall with investigating its veracity. In a statement published on the BBC's website on Friday, Sharp insisted that while he did breach the Governance Code for Public Appointments, the lapse was inadvertent and not material. The public broadcaster's head claimed that the inquiry had confirmed this, concluding that a breach does not necessarily invalidate an appointment. Sharp went on to explain that he had decided to vacate his post regardless to prioritize the interests of the BBC. He will, however, remain in office until June when a successor is appointed. Sharp claims he acted in good faith and with the best of intentions, when he introduced Canadian multi-millionaire Sam Blythe to the then Prime Minister back in December 2020. The former ended up acting as a loan guarantor for Johnson, with up to £800,000, $997,440, reportedly provided to the politician. The Times reported that Sharp had facilitated the meeting between the two just weeks before Johnson recommended him for the top job at the BBC. In his statement on Friday, Sharp described his failure to disclose information about his involvement as an oversight. The allegations against Sharp made by the Times saw multiple Labour lawmakers call for an investigation into the case and for the BBC's chair resignation. Sharp eventually spoke in favor of such a review himself, insisting that it would prove there was no conflict of interest in his appointment. Turkey confirms intention to mediate bank payments for Russian grain, fertilizers. The issue of the mediation of a Turkish bank in payments to Russia for the sale of grain and fertilizers is on the agenda. The goal is to keep the Black Sea Initiative, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said on Friday. The question of a Turkish bank mediating payments to Russia for the sale of grain and fertilizers is on the agenda. The goal is to solve the problem and keep the deal, Cavusoglu said, as quoted by the Turkish newspaper. Earlier this week, Cavusoglu said that UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres suggested that Ankara consider the possibility of mediation by Turkish banks in resolving the situation with the access of Russian agricultural products to global markets. The Black Sea Grain Initiative, signed between Russia, Turkey, Ukraine, and the United Nations amid the military conflict in Ukraine in July 2022, provides for exports of Ukrainian grain, food, and fertilizers over the Black Sea from 3 ports, including Odessa. The package agreement also includes a memorandum of understanding between Russia and the UN to unblock Russian grain and fertilizer exports via the Black Sea, which, according to Moscow, has not been implemented amid Western sanctions. In March, Russia extended the deal for 60 of possible 120 days. Russia requested that in order to further extend the grain agreement after its expiration on May 18, the normalization of Moscow's agricultural exports, including bank payments, transport logistics, insurance, unfreezing of financial activities and the supply of ammonia through the Taliati-Odessa pipeline, must be ensured. China's cyber-hacker threat unparalleled, FBI. Beijing's digital army is bigger than all other countries combined, a senior official has insisted. File photo, FBI Director Christopher Wray speaks during a news conference at the Department of Justice in Washington. Copyright AP/Manuel Balceneda. FBI Director Christopher Wray has claimed that Chinese hackers outnumber U.S. cybersecurity agents by at least 50 to 1. He alleged that the People's Republic operates a larger cyber program than all other world powers combined. Addressing lawmakers during a House Appropriations Committee hearing on Thursday, Wray outlined the Bureau's recent cybersecurity efforts and its funding needs, stating the hackers are capable of inflicting greater damage than ever before, while placing special emphasis on the China threat. The scale of the Chinese cyber threat is unparalleled. They've got a bigger hacking program than every other major nation combined, and have stolen more of our personal and corporate data than all other nations, big or small, combined, he said, adding that Washington is struggling to keep up with Beijing in the cyber realm. To give you a sense of what we're up against, if each one of the FBI cyber agents and intel analysts focused exclusively on the China threat, on nothing but China, Chinese hackers would still outnumber FBI cyber personnel by at least 50 to 1. The Bureau head went on to warn of cyber attacks conducted by other foreign states, including Russia, Iran, and North Korea, but said China poses the greatest danger to U.S. privacy and security, pointing to its alleged multi-pronged strategy to surpass the U.S. as the global superpower. In addition to nation-state actors, Wray also noted the FBI's concerns about private cyber criminals, saying the agency is now investigating over 100 different ransomware variants, referring to a common form of malware which seeks to hold user data hostage in exchange for payment. China claims U.S. seeking cyber hegemony. Read more. China claims U.S. seeking cyber hegemony. The FBI has requested funding to create around 200 additional cyber positions at the Bureau to address the purported threat from China, seeking just over $63 million, in addition to the $10.8 billion budget already proposed for the 2023 fiscal year. There's no country that presents a more significant threat to our innovation, our ideas, our economic security, our national security than the Chinese government, Wray continued. And that's why we've grown the number of investigations into threats from China to about 1,300%. Chinese officials have denied U.S. allegations of hacking and data theft, and instead leveled similar charges at Washington. Earlier this month, the Chinese Foreign Ministry claimed the U.S. is now the biggest threat to global cybersecurity and seeks to maintain its hegemony in cyberspace, urging the U.S. to cease its global hacking operations. SCOVS Washington's Asia-Pacific Pacts, how Eurasian Bloc can oppose U.S. Diktat. Russia's defense minister has warned that Washington is actively working to sabotage the creation of a multipolar world in the Asia-Pacific region, including by forming exclusive politico-military blocs. Russian Asia experts Boris Folkhansky and Alexei Kupriyanov explain what the Shanghai Cooperation Organization can do to resist these pressures. The West's opposition to strengthening multipolarity is most active in the Asia-Pacific region, where the U.S. has initiated the breakdown of the existing ASEAN-based system of regional cooperation. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said at a Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, defense ministers meeting in New Delhi, India on Friday. Pointing to the creation of new exclusive politico-military blocs such as AUKUS, which consists of Australia, the UK, and the US, and Quad, Australia, India, Japan, and the US. Shoigu accused Washington of attempting to undermine the SCO country's security by trying to re-establish a military presence in Central Asia. Today, Shoigu said, Washington and its accomplices are carrying out their strategic plan, which consists of provoking other countries into a military confrontation with Russia and China. A clear confirmation of this criminal policy is Ukraine. The US's true goal is to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia, threaten China, and maintain its monopoly position in the world. Shoigu called on Russia and its SCO partners to strengthen security interaction through joint exercises, with a special emphasis on counterterrorism, drone warfare, information and biological security, and the creation of a mechanism for the exchange of information in military security. The SCO should also consider expanding other forms of cooperation, such as peacekeeping, he said. Finally, Shoigu also stressed the need to enhance cooperation between the SCO and other Eurasian integrative organizations, such as the Russia-led Collective Security Treaty Organization Alliance and the Commonwealth of Independent States. SCO's existence is a miracle. The very fact that the SCO continues to exist and somehow function and develop is a very good thing, says Dr. Alexei Kupriyanov, a senior fellow at the Russian Academy of Sciences Center for Asia-Pacific Studies. Because it exists despite the fact that we currently have a situation in which one major SCO power has a conflict on its border in Ukraine, while China has another conflict on its border brewing in Taiwan, sanctions have not been lifted against Iran. This is a situation where you have Afghanistan sticking out in the middle of all this and it's unclear where things will turn, a situation where the Americans specifically and our Western comrades in general are very actively pushing India toward a confrontation with China. A situation where sanctions have been partially imposed against China, and fully against us. Despite all this, the SCO as an organization continues to exist, and not just exist, but also function. Despite all these problems, despite the disputes between the Indians and Pakistanis, despite the fact that the India-China issue has not yet been resolved, despite the problems in the Taiwan Strait, despite all this, India, China, Russia and others continue to see potential in the SCO. Kupriyanov told Sputnik. They see that it's necessary to develop in this direction into the future. Because all of the present problems are transient, but in the future, in any case, all of us will have to live next to one another, and the SCO is a very good format for establishing and maintaining dialogue on issues of concern to everyone, the academic added. According to Kupriyanov, cooperation within the SCO means that at a minimum, its members, Russia, China, India, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Iran, which signed a memorandum to join the Pact last September, at a minimum do not see one another as potential enemies. Notwithstanding border disputes or historical problems between them. Platform for Construction of New World Order. Dr. Boris Volkhansky, an associate professor at Moscow State University's Institute of Asian and African Countries, says the reason the SCO works as an organization is because it serves as a platform for dialogue where real problems must be solved and common security threats identified, among them the threat of terrorism. At the same time, the professor told Sputnik, the SCO and organizations like the BRICS group of nations may very well serve as a jumping-off point for the formation of a new global architecture outside the US-dominated rules-based international order. Iran's recent entry into the SCO shows that civilizational centers like China, Russia, India, and Iran, that is, relatively ancient civilizations, may very well be the cornerstone for a new world order alternative to the global West, Volkhansky told Sputnik. For this to be accomplished, a number of steps will be necessary, the academic said. This includes integrating regional economic and infrastructures such as China's Belt and Road Initiative and the North-South Transport Corridor between Russia, Iran, and India. These projects could very well be combined within a single system, but a degree of mistrust between India and China is preventing this for now. I believe overcoming this distrust and expanding integration and cooperation on those issues where it is possible is precisely the way forward. Countries need to forget a little about the issues between India and China, between India and Pakistan, between, to put it more broadly, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, and develop these relations where common points of contact exist. Dr. Kupriyanov agrees, saying that an improvement in the regional situation will require steps like settling the China-India border conflict, joint efforts to pressure the Taliban in Afghanistan to live up to its commitments, on human rights for example. The creation of new transport infrastructure and regional joint economic projects. There is a lot that can be done. The main problem for us, at least in this region, is U.S. economic pressure and the fact that trade is still very much tied to the dollar, the academic said. Indian Keystone. Volkanovsky places special emphasis on India's role in the SCO, given that Delhi is simultaneously attempting to engage in dialogue and balance good ties with both Russia and the United States. There are three factors accounting for the general calm observed in the SCO space today, according to the academic. The first, of course, is the fact that India not only holds the presidency of the SCO, but also of the G20. Therefore, Delhi is trying to pursue a balanced policy and not to exacerbate anything. Its slogan in the G20 is One Earth, One Family, One Future, the idea that we share one destiny, that all of humanity is one. The idea is of a world without dividing lines, so it is clear that India, as the host of the SCO ministerial meetings, of the SCO summit and the G20 summit, will strive for a consensus on the broadest possible range of issues. The second factor is related to the general elections set to take place in India in 2024, ahead of which Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his ruling Bharatiya Janata Party hope to achieve some big successes, including in the foreign policy dimension. Finally, Volkanovsky says, the third factor is a global one, and relates to changes in the world and the approaching end of the monopoly on power of the global West and the rise of the global South. Here, looking at the global South, it includes India, China, Pakistan, Iran, the Arab countries, the nations of Africa, Latin America. All of this is the global South, and if we consider their interests, we see that in many ways they align. Notwithstanding the difficulties in bilateral relations, the global interests of India and China align, and consist of the absolute rejection of anyone's diktat, of a unipolar world order, and the desire to see new centers of power arise in the world. Kupriyanov highlights the importance of the upcoming elections in Pakistan following last year's ouster of Prime Minister Imran Khan from power. One key outstanding problem between the two countries within SCO format dialogue is terrorism, with neither side particularly eager to cooperate on this issue, with India accusing Pakistan of assisting militants in Kashmir, and Pakistan charging India of helping militants in Balochistan. Without the resolution of this key issue, normal, full-fledged interaction will remain impossible, the expert concluded. China's cyberhacker threat unparalleled, FBI. Beijing's digital army is bigger than all other countries combined, a senior official has insisted. FBI Director Christopher Wray has claimed that Chinese hackers outnumber U.S. cybersecurity agents by at least 50 to 1. He alleged that the People's Republic operates a larger cyber program than all other world powers combined. Addressing lawmakers during a House Appropriations Committee hearing on Thursday, Wray outlined the Bureau's recent cybersecurity efforts and its funding needs, stating the hackers are capable of inflicting greater damage than ever before, while placing special emphasis on the China threat. The scale of the Chinese cyber threat is unparalleled. They've got a bigger hacking program than every other major nation combined, and have stolen more of our personal and corporate data than all other nations, big or small, combined, he said, adding that Washington is struggling to keep up with Beijing in the cyber realm. To give you a sense of what we're up against, if each one of the FBI's cyber agents and intel analysts focused exclusively on the China threat, on nothing but China, Chinese hackers would still outnumber FBI cyber personnel by at least 50 to 1. The Bureau head went on to warn of cyber attacks conducted by other foreign states, including Russia, Iran, and North Korea, but said China poses the greatest danger to U.S. privacy and security, pointing to its alleged multi-pronged strategy to surpass the U.S. as the global superpower. In addition to nation-state actors, Wray also noted the FBI's concerns about private cyber criminals, saying the agency is now investigating over 100 different ransomware variants, referring to a common form of malware which seeks to hold user data hostage in exchange for payment. The FBI has requested funding to create around 200 additional cyber positions at the Bureau to address the purported threat from China, seeking just over $63 million, in addition to the $10.8 billion budget already proposed for the 2023 fiscal year. There's no country that presents a more significant threat to our innovation, our ideas, our economic security, our national security than the Chinese government, Ray continued. And that's why we've grown the number of investigations into threats from China to about 1,300%. Chinese officials have denied U.S. allegations of hacking and data theft, and instead leveled similar charges at Washington. Earlier this month, the Chinese Foreign Ministry claimed the U.S. is now the biggest threat to global cybersecurity and seeks to maintain its hegemony in cyberspace, urging the U.S. to cease its global hacking operations. China strongly opposes U.S. deterring rock chip exports to China. China strongly opposes the U.S. requirement of forbidding chip makers of the Republic of Korea, ROK, to fill the gap of chip exports left by their American peers in the Chinese market, said a Commerce Ministry spokesperson Thursday. The U.S. act is textbook bullying that severely disrupts regular economic and trade exchanges between companies and undermines market regulations and the International Economic and Trade Order, Xu Zhiding, spokesperson for the Ministry of Commerce, told a press conference. She also mentioned that the move threatens the security and stability of global industrial and supply chains. Benign competition or decoupling. Given that the U.S. had often expressed its willingness to engage in benign competition with China instead of pursuing China-U.S. decoupling, China hopes that the U.S. side will stay true to its words and respect companies' rights to conduct investment and trade to achieve win-win outcomes, said Xu. Noting that the chip industry chain is built on collaboration between economies with respective comparative advantages. Xu said that the U.S. is seeking decoupling and disruption of industrial and supply chains by abusing export control and forcing some countries to practice trade protectionism against China. Xu added such U.S. attempts are the main reason behind the recent revenue and profit nosedives of companies along the industrial and supply chains of chips in certain countries. Citing a comment piece on the matter, Xu said governments and companies of relevant countries should defend free trade rules and construct a global industrial and supply chain system that is safe, stable, open, inclusive, and win-win. Addressing media reports on upcoming U.S. measures to contain investments in China, Xu said it is a typical non-market practice to intervene or restrict companies' decision-making using administrative means. She also said that the move is against the basic principles of global economics and trade to launch discriminatory containment directed at a specific country, adding that China will strongly oppose the U.S. measures if the news is true. Russia planning major crackdown on grey economy, RBK. The country has long been known for its vast shadow sector. The Russian government has been tasked with increasing the welfare of its citizens by reducing unreported employment, RBK reported on Friday, citing two participants of a strategic session chaired by Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin earlier this week. Sources told the Business Daily that a set of measures is being considered at the federal level, including the use of big data to monitor companies, as well as inspections of organizations with signs of illegal employment by the Federal Tax Service. According to RBK sources, the monitoring is necessary despite the falling numbers of cash under the table salaries, while some employees are still illegally being paid below the minimum wage. Salaries in the informal sector are on average 30% lower, the sources noted. According to the Federal State Statistics Service, Rosstat, for 10% of the Russian population, the average per capita monthly income in the fourth quarter of 2022 amounted to 10,500 rubles, $132, while the official minimum wage was 15,300 rubles, $193. Participants in the strategic session have also discussed the possibility of introducing support measures for Russian companies that legally pay decent salaries, RBK wrote. The Ministry of Economic Development reported this month that real earnings in Russia during 2023 will grow more than previously expected, predicting an increase of 5.4%. That growth will be facilitated by low unemployment and competition for personnel, as well as the government's targeted assistance to the population, including to families with children, the indexation of the minimum wage, living wage, pensions and social benefits, the ministry said. The latest data from Россtat shows that unemployment in Russia is at its lowest since the 1990s, with the total number of jobless residents in February at 2.635 million. Russian President Vladimir Putin has also confirmed that unemployment in the country is at a record low, calling on the government to expand the national project for labor productivity. The Russian leader emphasized that work needed to continue and that young people needed opportunities for their professional development and training so they could acquire skills and ultimately be able to better provide for their families. Russia-India trade surges. Exports of Russian goods topped $40 billion for the first time. Russia has become India's fifth largest trading partner over the past year, RIA Novosti reported on Thursday, citing calculations based on data from the Indian Ministry of Commerce and Industry. According to the report, Russia exported $41.6 billion worth of goods to India in the fiscal year beginning in April 2022 and ending in March 2023. The figure is more than 4 times the record set in the previous fiscal year. Trade turnover between the two countries reached $44.4 billion in the reporting period, with India shipping $2.8 billion worth of goods to Russia. Among India's other major trading partners in the reporting period were the U.S., with trade turnover of $118.2 billion, China, $104.3 billion, the UAE, $77.6 billion, and Saudi Arabia, $48.3 billion. Moscow and New Delhi have seen substantial growth in bilateral trade over the past year, which, according to an earlier statement by the Indian Minister of External Affairs, Subrahmanyam Jaishankar, has been rapidly outpacing the $30 billion by 2025 target initially set by the two countries. This is largely due to India's increased purchases of Russian oil after Moscow was forced to reroute its energy exports away from Western countries amid the Ukraine-related sanctions. The country's purchases of Russian oil reached an all-time high of 1.64 million barrels per day in March, nearly double the amount delivered by Saudi Arabia, India's second-largest oil supplier, according to data from cargo tracker Vortexa. Russia's share of Indian oil imports last month stood at 34%. The countries have also recently relaunched talks regarding a free trade agreement between India and the Russia-led Eurasian Economic Union, which is expected to help boost mutual trade further. Russia overtakes U.S. in fertilizer production, official. Output has surged by 40%, the head of the country's trade body says. Russia has become the world's second-largest producer of mineral fertilizer, Andrei Guryev, the head of the Russian Association of Fertilizer Producers, said at a meeting with President Vladimir Putin on Thursday. According to Guryev, output has increased by 40% over the past decade to 55 million tons a year. During the same period, the volume of fertilizer supplies to the domestic market grew 2.5 times to 13.2 million tons, a record for the country, he noted. We overtook the United States, India in production, and today we are the largest producer of mineral fertilizers in the world after China, he said, adding that the country plans to boost output to 70 million tons over the next 5 years. Guryev noted that Russia is the world's largest exporter of fertilizers, supplying around 38 million tons a year. According to the International Fertilizers Association, at the start of 2022, Russian exports accounted for 15% of global fertilizer exports, followed by China, 13%, and Canada, 7%. The official noted, however, that exports dropped by around 15% in 2022 against the previous year. He attributed the decline to the Ukraine-related Western sanctions and all the problems for exports they have caused. While Russian agricultural products have not been targeted directly by sanctions, the restrictions have resulted in a variety of problems for the country's exporters due to the large quantity of shipments blocked in European ports. Removing obstacles to Russian fertilizer exports is part of the Black Sea grain deal, A un-Turkey brokered agreement reached last summer to help export Ukrainian and Russian agricultural goods. The deal has already been extended several times and is set to expire on May 18. However, Russia has repeatedly stated that the part of the deal that refers to its agriculture and fertilizer exports has not been implemented, warning that it may suspend its participation in the agreement if the situation does not improve. President Vladimir Putin said on Thursday that sanctions that jeopardize Russian fertilizer exports have already hurt a number of countries that depend upon them. Sanctions were imposed by countries that do not particularly need our fertilizers, and the developing markets now suffer from it. They imposed sanctions against us, but the developing markets of Africa, Latin America, Asia suffered the most, he stated, adding that the failure to put fertilizers in the soil leads to a decrease in the harvest, which may result in food shortages and a spike in food prices worldwide. New evidence suggests recent water activity on Mars. Study. Scientists have identified polygonal features with hydrated minerals on Mars, providing new evidence of recent water activity on the red planet that sheds light on the hydrological cycle in its current cold and dry climate. A research team from China University of Geosciences, Wuhan, by studying in situ imaging and spectral data acquired by China's Zhurong rover, has identified some polygonal features with hydrated minerals such as gypsum on the surface of transverse alien ridges, TARS, in the rover's landing region of Utopia Planitia. The researchers said these polygonal features could be related to recent aqueous activity and atmosphere surface water exchange on Mars. The study was published in the scientific journal Geophysical Research Letters on March 28. TARS, a kind of ripple-like alien landform widely distributed on Mars, are important to study the atmospheric motion and climate of the planet. By using high-resolution remote sensing data, the researchers found a total of 354 TARS in a 2 km by 2 km region, which includes the traverse of the rover in its first 100 Martian days, and conducted detailed morphological analysis on the TARS. Fresh-appearing polygonal features on the TARS are reported, which provides significant new evidence for recent aqueous activity on Mars, said the study. Two possible formation mechanisms of the polygons were proposed, which are contractional cracks formed during groundwater evaporation and fracture of indurated sand crust. The researchers believe the latter is the most plausible origin. Russian paratroopers to receive new Zavesty artillery control vehicles in 2023. The systems are being developed by the Rubin Research and Production Company and are based on the BTRMDM Rakushka amphibious armored personnel carrier. They can reliably detect and identify various targets, including concealed ones, providing interaction capabilities between artillery and drones. Russian airborne troops will receive new automated artillery control vehicles called Zavesty by the end of 2023, which will double the efficiency of artillery, according to the press service of the Rostec State Corporation. The first batch of the systems will be delivered to troops by the end of 2023, the corporation statement reads. The complex is equipped with a reconnaissance optical electronic system and an external radar. It can detect a target at a distance of up to 7,000 meters and identify it at a distance of up to 5,000 meters. The vehicle determines the direction and speed of enemy movement, identifies targets, and distributes them according to the degree of danger, after which it provides targeting to artillery crews in real time. The Zavesty is capable of increasing the effectiveness of artillery systems used by the airborne forces, such as the 2C-9 Nona S self-propelled guns, 2C-9-1 Sphira Stelka, and 2C-9-1M Nona SM, by 1.5 to 2 times. This brain-hijacking parasite drives wolves toward pack leadership. Research has revealed that the effects of a parasite known as Toxoplasma gondii, for which felines are a necessary part of the life cycle, and linked with a swathe of neurological disorders, may have been insufficiently studied when it comes to the behavior of wild animals like wolves. Wolves become geared to take over as leaders of a pack when infected with the parasite Toxoplasma gondii, research has shown. Furthermore, the infection with the microscopic organism can alter the behavior pattern of wolves to such a degree that the dynamics of an entire ecosystem may be changed dramatically. The microscopic organism, infamous for only being able to reproduce in the bodies of our domestic cats, as well as other felines, can infect most warm-blooded animals. In the case of humans, it can cause a disease called toxoplasmosis. While typically symptomless, the disease may be fatal for a weakened immune system. One quite chilling aspect of this parasite's life cycle is that it has evolved ways of maximizing the chances of its offspring to get back inside a feline for further reproduction. This is why this parasite is dubbed mind-altering, or mind-hijacking. Previous studies revealed that rats infected with the parasite are prone to taking greater risks, and even being drawn towards feline urine. In that case, cats are, of course, likelier to catch and eat them. But, back to the wolves, specifically, gray wolves, Canis lupus, populating the territory of Yellowstone National Park, largely in the northwest area of the U.S. state of Wyoming, but also Montana and Idaho. Scientists led by biologists Connor Meyer and Kira Cassidy of the Yellowstone Wolf Project studied behavioral data on wolves, accumulated over 26 years. They also analyzed the blood samples of 229 wolves and cougars, which also populate the area. The wolves were believed to become occasionally infected after eating dead cougars, or ingesting cougar feces. As they were gauging the infection rate with this parasite, the researchers hit upon two things. Firstly, those wolves whose territory overlapped with cougars were more likely to be infected with T. gondii. But there was also a behavioral consequence. They found that such wolves were eager to take greater risks. Here are some of the numbers the research came out with. Infected wolves were 46 times more likely to become a pack leader. Infected wolves were 11 times more likely to leave their pack and check out new territory. Infected male wolves had a 50% probability of leaving their pack within 6 months, compared with 21 months for the uninfected. Infected females had a 25% chance of leaving their pack within 30 months, compared with 48 months for not infected. It was speculated that T. gondii raised testosterone levels, triggering a greater degree of aggression and a powerful desire for dominance, the sort of traits a pack leader might require. Furthermore, the research determined something that was dubbed a feedback loop, rooted in overlap of territory and infection. Due to the group living structure of the gray wolf pack, the pack leaders have a disproportionate influence on their pack mates and on group decisions. If the lead wolves are infected with T. gondii and show behavioral changes, this may create a dynamic whereby behavior, triggered by the parasite in one wolf, influences the rest of the wolves in the pack, stated the study. The conclusion was that an infected pack leader would be lured to follow the scent of cougar urine, leaving the rest of the wolves facing a potentially greater rate of T. gondii infection. Thus, a whole ecosystem could be affected by a tiny parasite. China's digital economy grew to 50.2 trillion yuan in 2022, report. The scale of China's digital economy grew to 50.2 trillion yuan, about $7.25 trillion, in 2022, with a year-on-year nominal growth of 10.3% and ranking second globally, an industry report released on Thursday revealed. The share of the digital economy in the country's GDP rose to 41.5%, according to the report on the development of China's digital industry released at the ongoing 6th Digital China Summit held in Fuzhou City, East China's Fujian province. It added that the country's digital economy has ranked second in the world for several years and has become a major growth engine for the country marching toward modernization. By the end of 2022, China had put 2.31 million 5G base stations into operation, and the number of 5G users in the country had reached 561 million, accounting for more than 60% of the world's total, the report said. With the theme of accelerating the construction of digital China to promote Chinese modernization, the two-day summit focuses on showcasing the latest achievements of the Digital China initiative and on sharing experiences in digital development. As a part of the summit, a 5-day exhibition was opened to the public in Fuzhou. Participants have the opportunity to witness progress in areas such as digital infrastructure, digital economy, and digital society at the exhibition. For digital communication, a secure, stable and real-time communication network technology attracted participants' attention. An exhibitor brought an ultra-low latency and low delay variation transmission network, which could be used in intelligent driving, agriculture, and remote medicine. According to the exhibitor, the network latency shown in a two-way communication test from Beijing to Fuzhou is only 38 milliseconds, 38 thousandths of a second. It is critical for extremely precise industries and applications, such as remote surgery, to ensure safe operation. Besides, unmanned tractors, agricultural drones, and robotic tuna that can be patrolled underwater were displayed at the exhibition. Digital technologies applied to agriculture can help liberate manpower and improve efficiency. When used in culture, digital technology can help break the limitations of physical space, show the content of cultural relics more vividly, and experience classic cultural relics in an immersive and interactive way, according to an exhibitor. Scientists discover 3 Roman military camps in Arabian desert. Recent traces of 3 ancient Roman fortified military camps were uncovered through remote sensing conducted by the School of Archaeology at Oxford University, as well as through satellite images. Archaeologists working in the Arabian desert have discovered 3 Roman fortified camps, potentially holding evidence of an undocumented military campaign that had once been established in the region. Scientists believe the finding links back to the Roman Empire, when Romans advanced through the desert lands as part of a campaign tied to the Roman takeover of the Nabatean kingdom in 106 AD. The Nabatean kingdom existed from the 3rd century BC in what is now Jordan, Israel, Syria and Saudi Arabia. It was formed by the Nabateans, a group of Arab tribes. In 105 AD, according to other sources in 106, the Roman Emperor Trajan annexed Nabatea to the Roman Empire, taking advantage of the discord in the kingdom after the death of its king. These marching camps, if we are correct in dating them to the early 2nd century, suggest the Roman annexation of the Nabatean kingdom following the death of the last king, Rabel II Soter in AD 106, was not an entirely straightforward affair. And that Rome moved quickly to secure the kingdom, notes the co-author of the article, Professor Andrew Wilson. The camps found are similar in form but different in size, with the western camp sizing in much larger than the other 2 camps. Study leader Dr. Michael Fradley believes there is little doubt about the date of these camps. We are almost certain they were built by the Roman army, given the typical playing card shape of the enclosures with opposing entrances along each side. The only notable difference between them is that the westernmost camp is significantly larger than the 2 camps to the east, Dr. Fradley points out. Since the distance between each camp ranges from 37 to 44 kilometers, the team hypothesizes that it was too far for soldiers to walk in a day, and that it was built by a cavalry unit that may have crossed the desert on camels. The camps are a spectacular new find and an important new insight into Roman campaigning in Arabia, archaeologist Mike Bishop, founder and editor of the Journal of Roman Military Equipment Studies, said. Roman forts and fortresses show how Rome held a province, but temporary camps reveal how they acquired it in the first place. Experts believe the camps were built as temporary defensive posts. Fradley has stated that their level of preservation is impressive, considering the structures were likely only used for a few days or weeks. Based on the distance between the camps, officials have also speculated that another camp may have been located farther west, at the later Umayyad fort and well station at Bayr. Officials are next looking to confirm the construction date of the sites, as well as determine the reasoning for the size differences in the camps. The research findings were published in the journal Antiquity,